This is Coffee and Conversation with Hampton 3 Gallery. I'm Luke DeLisle, the curator, and this is Leo Twiggs, who we're talking to today, doing his most recent show here. Leo, before we get too in-depth, do you want to just talk about a few of the paintings? I think it'd be awesome to talk about the three centerpieces on the wall: the railroad crossing, the self-portrait, and the Mother Emanuel piece, because this show has kind of been put together as a means of collecting a lot of your symbols across your career that have repeated, and the self-portrait collects a ton of those symbols. So I think a way to just kind of start this conversation might be to talk about these three centerpieces just briefly.
Well, you can say again all of them. I'll just talk about initially the ones that I remember because they were so important to my career. One of the reasons that I think you should know that I painted in series is because for the first part of my career, I worked at a university and I taught. And I painted after class. Sometimes I painted during class. Sometimes I painted on weekends. And when you're painting like that, and my process is so tedious, you have to remember where you've been when you get back there. So I go to my class, I teach my students, and if I'm doing a series like, for instance, the Mother Emanuel series or the Crossing series, then I can get right back into the mood of what I'm doing because I've been doing that for a while. And so that's the reason why you see 3 or 4 paintings about the same thing early in my career. Well, that was good for me because it would not have worked if I had retired in 1998 and had not had a body of work, because that segued into a show that I had at the Georgia Museum, which was my retrospective. So much for that. And you talk about crossings. Well, you know, as an artist, to me, art is a journey. And as you travel on that road, more things pop up. It's like seeing different things as you go down that road. And you go to places you arrive at. And I believe that as an artist, you have to arrive at places. You can't go to places. When you arrive at places, you've taken a journey. You're on an adventure. But when you go to a place, you don't see you anesthetize to the surroundings. You simply go there and say, I got to go to Greenville, and you don't look at the fact that there are houses around, the buildings are there. You don't see anything else because you signal on that. I never thought of my art that way. I thought of it always as this journey, and you get some exciting things. One of the journeys was this crossing. And at first, I thought about a railroad crossing in my hometown. And I used to work as a projections of theater and look down on the hometown. I had a vantage point. I was 30 feet up, and I could see the train. The train divided our town, came right through the middle of it. And I'd see the train come in. For instance, train would come in. There would be people out there wanting to get on the train, and the train would stop, and you hear, and I'm up there looking down on it, and then all of a sudden the train would leave, and everybody would be gone. I was wondering whether anything could be left in my hometown after the trains came through. So people just went on, they went up north, but they left out my hometown, and I could see that. But another thing that happened is when that railroad track was there, nobody could cross over that track to the other side of the town. If it comes down Main Street, there's stores and nobody could cross over until it came down. And then I thought, how that train track separated us to the point where one side didn't know the other side. So to me, that was fascinating. That was a plug that I found along that journey. And then when I thought about it, I said, that's what's happening to us as human beings, as people. We have this thing dividing us, and then we have to cross over it. And we won't know about the other side unless we cross over it. And then discovering another thing on this journey, I noticed that the sign for crossing is very similar to the signs Confederate flag. They're almost in the same proportion. Here I am making connections on this journey again. And then I thought, what we have to do is we as human beings must cross over the things that we have. Then I thought about what Tennyson talked about. Tennyson talked about crossing that bar and that final crossing. And then I thought about what happened at a funeral that I attended for one of our colleagues. And he's talked about Tennyson and what Tennyson said, and that the pastor who was doing the funeral, the eulogist said, Barbara has made that final crossing. And then I thought, as human beings, we have to cross over things. A love affair gone wrong, you have to cross over it. Somebody strikes you back and says something mean about you, a neighbor, a friend, you have to cross over it. A divorce, you have to cross over it. So life is a series of crossings. Again, I discovered that on my journey. And that's what an artist does. You take this journey, and this journey takes you places. Now, your problem is, how do you make that visual? How do you create a visual image to show that? If you look at behind me, you see a Confederate flag on one side, but you see the cross on the other side. And if you take the cross and slide it a little bit, you see a flag image under the cross. And so when I was doing Mother Emanuel, I knew that they had to transition from that hateful thing because they were Christian. That's what they said meant when you said, I forgive. That's what that is about. And then forgive, who's forgiving? I put the 9 there. I like that, just that 9. And if you notice, there are other images where I've just used 9, or I've used a symbol, because I believe that for an artist is not what you say, but the way that you say it. That's what art is about. Art is not what you do, but it's the way that you do it. That's why a basketball player like Michael Jordan called it the art of basketball. And everybody else goes up and does a layup. He goes up, puts it through his leg, and makes a layup. You think that's showing off. That's just exhibiting his art. And if you notice when they come down and they dunk, they always holler, scream, and look at somebody. And so, but it's an art. It's how you practice that art. And so in my series of paintings, what I did, I went on this journey from this place to that place. And one of the things I always try not to do is belabor the point. But belaboring the point is like the minister who comes in and has this great sermon, and then he says, and one more thing. Should never have said that. Should never have said that. One of the things that I think a good artist knows where to start, but a better artist knows where to stop. And you stop when you get the viewer engaged and you say, if I put anything else, I muddy the image. How do you balance the little things you say against the big things you say? How do you emphasize a point? And because in this painting, you notice all kind of stuff going on in there. I got the little flowers in there, but when you're back there, you can't see that. You can't see that until you walk up closer. And one of the things that intrigued me about the batik and using the dye is that in most paintings, you stand away from it and you see it. With this, the closer you get to it, the more you see. The closer you get to it, the more you see. And he hung this show and lit the show. I never knew what the way a show was lit could make that much difference, because I've been to the Scarra many times before. I've never seen the show lit like this, because every point is a sparkle. And so you can go and look at that sparkle. But what makes it really intriguing is that when it's a sparkle and you go up there, you begin to see things that you didn't see before. If it's a little dim, you don't see the floral pattern behind here. Does a floral pattern mean anything? It does, because you remember Little House on the Prairie, the dresses they wore from that particular era? I wanted to use that fabric because that fabric connects with that particular era. Another point along that journey that I spoke about early on. Now, what was the other one?
I think we covered everything except if you've got 2 minutes on the self-portrait, which kind of brings it all together. Okay. It's not a self-portrait, the studio portrait, sorry.
Everybody calls it a self-portrait. I never looked at a mirror to see that, I just put it in. That's the studio. I have a studio, and the studio has windows, those 5 windows at the top. in my studio, because I had my studio built by a friend, and the picture of the house in the booklet, it's the other on that other end. A studio is like a sanctuary. You know, you go in there, and my studio is unique in that I have a garage in between it. Now, I got a bed over there, a day bed, so my wife can come in and sit down if she wants to. Never does. Never does. I think when I get out of the house, she can get on the phone and have a good time, and knowing that I'm out there wrestling with my art. But when I get in the studio, sometimes I'll sit down and look out that window, because that window I could see the moon traversing. You know, I can see clouds. They go through one window to another window to another window to another window. I could think about what I want to do. I can concentrate on that journey that I just spoke about. And so I stay there until the spirit moves me, and then I move into another space. When I was doing that picture, I started it, and Sandy came in and saw it. Oh, you're doing a big picture, because big ones take a long time. When these 3x4 paintings here sometimes takes 2 months or more to do. You know, it's amazing that I started doing batik, and I don't know anybody else who's doing it. Not like I'm doing it. They do it, but they do wall hanging. That's because it requires patience, and it's unforgiving. You know, you put the dye in it, you can't take it off. You can put some Clorox on it, but it ain't gonna work. It's gonna mess you up, you know. And so when I was doing this painting, what I did was I just started working on it, worked a little bit at a time. I knew I wanted to start with the windows, because that's what I saw when I went out there. And then I started I said, well, it's a studio. You know, Matisse did a painting called The Red Studio. And so I started putting the pictures around the wall. My studio is white. It's all white, but I made it all black because I wanted to accentuate the paintings. And the painting's going to represent my journey, that journey I was talking to you about, where there's some things from many different things. And then at the end down there, at the bottom, when you're in a studio, it's like in a sanctuary, even the window back there becomes background. Everything else is background to my work. And I didn't do a self-portrait. What I have is when I'm working, a figure emerges, and I just work on that. I let the spirit move me. If something is coming out, I just accentuate it. But you have to accentuate it just to the point where it shows a little something and it stops. When I looked at that and I said, those glasses, they look like somebody I know, then I stopped.
Fantastic. We'll go ahead and open it up to questions. Does anybody want to start us off?
You know, when I look at my journey, in many ways began right here. 1972, the only African American in this gallery. Sandy was a little girl running around, I guess. What are you saying? And now this gallery has won a Verna Award. I don't know that there's any gallery in the state that's won a Verna Award. And galleries aren't easy to do these days because you're competing with so much else. And I think the fact that she has done what she's done, and it's because of Sandy, let's face it. We talked about that. In that, you know, when Sandy isn't in the car, we talk about her. So coming up here, they picked us up, and so we talked about her contribution, about her dedication. The first retrospective show I had came from here. Bill Ireland at the Georgia Museum did it, and Bill came to the State Museum. I was working there. They had a show, and they had a couple of my flag paintings in the show. And Bill said, "Who's this guy?" He said, "Well, that's Leo Texas." I see he went to the University of Georgia. You know, maybe we ought to give him a show or something like that. That was mentioned. Sandy got the word, took a carousel of slides over to the University of Georgia. Bill is in his office doing the stuff that he has to do. She's showing the slides, and he's looking at the slides and doing his work and looking at the slide, and decided to do a retrospective show. And let me tell you, people say to me, you're from South Carolina, why is it that nobody else in South Carolina did it? I said, because nobody asked. And I'm glad they didn't ask, because one of the things, when you never go far away from home. When you're home, they say, "Oh, that's Leo. Yeah, we'll do a little show for him." Yeah. At the University of Georgia, 2 years into planning, Marion Lawfer was one of those persons. 2 years into planning, the catalog won an award, the Southeastern Museum Association. One of the best catalogs that I've seen of my work, and that was my first retrospective. And then Bill was so astute at seeing what I was doing, because I was doing Confederate flags and things. He wrote an essay that was subsequently published in the Chronicle in Higher Education, and people began to take second looks at what I was doing, and it all went from there. But it went because that lady back there, yeah. See how much she knows about me? That's why. See how much, yeah. Mother Emanuel is, I'm from St. Stephen's. That's just 45 miles north of Charleston. Everybody knew Mother Emanuel. Arthur Rowe was a member of that church. I just got a note from his son who said that, I see you're going to be in Charleston. That's another one. I'll talk about that in a minute. But when I heard that, I was shocked. I was shocked. And it kept running through my mind that I had need to do something. So I did a couple of paintings, and they were immediately purchased. I think one was an architect from Tennessee or something that purchased it. And then Jennifer Whittle was on the board of Spoleto, and they wanted to do an auction of things to raise some money. And I had this small painting, and, I don't like to give my paintings away. Doesn't help Sandy. It doesn't help me, because when they get it, they usually will auction it off and it'll sell for less than galleries are paying for it, and that's not good for you. But Jennifer took it. I said, I'll give it to you. So Jennifer arranged so that a lawyer friend of her in Orangeburg could take it to them, and they had it. And the painting sold for about $13,000, $14,000. It was a small painting like that. And Jennifer said, Leo, that was so amazing. Have you ever thought about doing 9? Are you kidding me? You know what it takes to do 9 paintings as long as I said, I don't know, Jennifer, but the number 9 struck me, because there were 9 victims. And so I started 9. And they weren't about each victim. There was just my feelings about that whole tragic event. And so I did 1, I did 2. Sandy would come and say, pick them up, and said, you on the next one yet? And as I did them, she picked them up, and they were selling as soon as she got them. They were never together. They were just selling as soon as she got them. And the last 3 were purchased by the Johnson Foundation here. I was just amazed, because I had not, that this came from Greenville. Now, this whole thing happened in Charleston, and yet I had this support. Joe Clark did a video. Must have cost a lot of money. They all did it up here. We had a woman at Fairman, art historian, who did a little catalog to go with it. And when the show opened in Charleston, they cleared out City Gallery, the whole, that big as that, for that one show, because I insisted that if the show is going to be, it should be in a place by itself, and the video should be shown with it. When people started looking at it, people were coming out of there crying, and it was shocking, because people don't cry about looking at pictures on a wall, because all you have to do is look away. You don't have to look at it. And yet they would always see the video, and then they'd look at the works. And we had a show at Spartanburg at the Johnson Gallery, and I mean, people would come in there and they started crying, or they'll look at me and they'll say, "Thank you so much," and break it off and run out of the room. Then we went to Charlotte, and they had a showing for the mayor and some of the members, a pre-showing, and they were there, and I was there, and I talked about what I was doing, and afterward I said, "Are there any questions?" And all I heard was sniffles in the room. And then I realized that maybe those people felt some of the same things I felt when I was doing the work. And that's what an artist wants. You want to transfer that feeling. And, of course, since then, we've been down to Auburn University. Like I said, we had the show in Charlotte. And the Mother Emanuel, of course, was reviewed in Art in America. And to me, it still has an impact because it came at a special time in my life. And I think it led to other things. And one of the things it led to has just happened, that the president of Virginia Theological Seminary. I understand that my niece worked with his wife, and she knew me, and she said, yeah, I know him. And then eventually I think she contacted you. Sandy did. Yeah, he contacted Sandy, and he wanted to do a picture for its 200th anniversary. Prior to that, I had done a painting called The Death of George Floyd that I approached the same way I did the Mother Emanuel series. It was so horrific to see somebody look into a camera with a knee on a neck and the life of a person draining out on that knee and treat it like a walk in the park. I was shocked. So I did this painting called The Death of George Floyd. Nothing in there, no, only human being was a human being down there like as he's choking, and that was it. And a person bought that painting, and then that painting was donated to the church. That was before they asked me to do that painting. So when I did the second painting, I thought, I really need to make that the same size. And that was difficult because it happened during the pandemic, and I had some problems with those shots. I didn't have any problem with the pandemic, with the virus. I just had shots with what they gave me to ward it off, the effects of it. And so it was really a struggle crawling around the floor to do this. And I did this painting for the seminary, and they took it up there. But the interesting thing is they had seen The Death of George Floyd, and a lot of them on the faculty were really upset about it. They said it was just too shocking. And so we had a Zoom call with the faculty. A Zoom call. They were all there. The president, Dr. Markham, was there. And I just talked about the feelings. I talked about, I said, you honor me with the fact that you were outraged by it because it was meant to be outraging. And then, of course, I did the second painting. The second painting was different because I looked at the church and the fact that, Reverend Curry is now the head of the church and all of that. And so I treated that. And when that came in, of course, Luke said that they said, no, maybe finally we got over that trauma. But I thought that was the end of the story. And then I got this letter that Dr. Markham wrote Sandy, and Sandy sent the letter to me. And it said, you have been selected for the Dean's Cross, which is the highest honor that the seminary bestows. And they wanted to tell me who else had gotten it. And they said Marion Albright and Barbara Bush and somebody else. They said that we wanted to bestow that on you and that you can pick your place. And so I picked a small church in Columbia, and I sent out things saying that keep the date to my friends. July the 16th, they said they would do it. He called me back soon after and says, we're not going to talk about this anymore. We're going to move this ceremony to Charleston, to Grace Cathedral, downtown Charleston, on Wentworth Street, number 98 of Wentworth Street. Grace Cathedral, the largest Episcopalian church in South Carolina. That ceremony is going to be next month, July the 16th, and it's an honor that has floored me since. Yeah, I like to talk about that. I was telling Luke the other day about, at the beginning of my career, I think I took the road less traveled. Frost, that poem by Robert Frost. You come to a fork in the road that verges, and one is all growing up, and the other is where people have gone over, and you have to make a decision. And I think I took the road less traveled because I started painting in a medium that nobody paints with. It's used to decorate fabric, but nobody paints with that. But that's what fascinated me, the color quality. At the Art Institute of Chicago, I saw the color quality of it. And so it just fascinated me, and I started doing it. It's tremendously time-consuming. And we live in a time when people don't like to spend that much time with anything. You go to your cell phone, if you're writing a letter, you make a mistake, you just do. Even painting, you gesso, you don't like it, you gesso it over. You got acrylics, and it dries immediately. And when I was in NYU, it didn't dry immediately. It was 4 days you'd be in there painting on it and it would still be wet. And so that. Now, the reason I said that and that the way that relates to the flag is that with batik, I use fabric in the first place. The flag itself is fabric. When I put wax on the fabric, I can crush it in my hands, and when I dip it in a dye solution, I get all the fine lines, spots, cracks, all that, which ages it. And my idea was, with the flag was, that suppose you had a grandfather who was in the war, and he saved his flag, and it's in the trunk, and 100 years later you pull it up, it would look like that. But you couldn't get that with paint. You couldn't convincingly get it with paint. But with my dyes, I could get that. And I really believe that when I started painting, because I never got blowback. Everybody says, how you didn't get blowback? I said, yeah. And let me tell you, one of the things that I admire about this gallery and about the people here, nobody said, we can't show that. Nobody ever said that. Nobody ever even approached that. And so I believe that when people saw that and saw, hey, this isn't the flag that's flying on top of the State House. You know, this is something else. We need to look at this to see what this is about. And I do think that the medium itself played a part in doing it. And then later on, people associated me with it, and nobody else, the other people who tried to paint it, but you paint it slick and clean, you get blowback right away, you know, what are you trying to do? Well, nobody did batiks, and so mine, it just kind of took the fore. And it's been something that I felt very good about, because I think that as an artist, you have to express what you feel. You know, you have to express what you feel. What I say is that with the flag is that we have to cross over it. And you have to cross over it, and you have to confront it. And I think Bill Island said something about taking ownership of it. I don't know what that means, but I know that one of the things that I wanted to do is to show the flag in the way that I think the flag ought to be. I think it ought to be in a museum, under glass, reserved. This is something that happened in our time. It happened to African Americans. It happened to white people. It's a phase that we went through, crossing over. We have to cross over that. And so my flags represent that inflection point that I think we have to get over. And so what I've done is I've treated the flags, I changed the color of it. You know, I've done everything else to it because I want to see whether or not that's St. Andrew's Cross. When you change it around, do different things to it, does it mean the same thing? If it's red, white, and blue, and you green and purple, does it mean the same thing? I want people to confront it, and when they confront it, confront their own feelings about it. And so I've created these different scenarios, so to speak. Hello? Well, you know, the amazing thing about it is, just as I had to have the courage to do it, I think people who hang it must have the courage to hang it. You know, yeah, that's all it is. And you have to explain to people, but, you know, that's the way we communicate. At the University of Georgia bought one of the flags and has it hanging up in the museum. The Herald out of Athens did a story about it and says, the title of the story is, "It's Not What You Think," or "It's Not What It Seems." That's the title of the story. And I know that when they see the flag images, they don't think about it. All they see is the flag images, and the mind pops into this place. So who's that bought the gray flag? Hartman bought the gray flag and had it in a room where you had a preppy guy who looked like he was on a bicycle or something, and it was a gray flag. You remember that, Sandy?
Yes, I do. I know who it is. Yes.
And they had this advertisement in this very high-end magazine, and he was there. And I'd never seen my flag like that. This guy's preppy, looked like, you know, I got on his polo stuff and sitting down, a black guy too, sitting down, you know, reading, and behind him is this gray flag. It's very subtle. But I think more than anything, the flags initiates the conversation. But let me tell you the person that I have the most courage for. Yesterday I met a person who bought one. I did a flag that I call resurrected flag. And a resurrection, I mean the fact that the flag was like that. You put it in the trunk and it's sold. And then all of a sudden now people are resurrecting it. So when they resurrected it, it's new again. It's like, it's like Frankenstein has come alive. And I had never done a resurrected flag. I inferred to it, but I'd never done one. And this flag is the biggest thing I've ever done. This painting is 72 by something almost. And so I did the bottom part, the old flag, and I wanted to show the transition where people are rising up to make that flag again with all the rhetoric and all of that. And so at the bottom of it, you see where the flag is deteriorating, but it's brightly, red, blue, as if it just came out yesterday. And when I got to that, I was shocked. I'm painting this thing, and I'm looking at it, and I'm shocked because I had never done that before. And I had never been up that close to a flag before. And there it was. And this person came in and purchased that, and yesterday came by to talk about it. And to me, it's the culmination of all of the stuff I just talked about. Because what he saw in that was what I started when I was doing that flag, and I went the other direction. I took the fact that people were doing this old flag, and I made it say that you shouldn't be looking at this flag. This is the flag that you should be referring to. But when it's resurrected, this old flag is here, and you're making it new again. We had this nice chat, and to me, it was one of the nice things that happened to me this weekend. And you think you got to explain. Boy, he probably has to have a seminar. I came to Claflin University, and an interesting thing how I got there. I was from a little town. I did my artwork. I did posters for the students and all of that, and all that kind of stuff. But when I graduated from high school, top of my class, there was no guidance counselor. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was a projection of the theater. The income from my work supplemented a small income that the Social Security gave us. I had 5 brothers and a sister they had to eat, and they depended on me to do that. And the principal said, yeah, that boy ought to go to college. But nobody told me how to do that. Nobody said how to do that. And a minister, a white minister in a Baptist church near my hometown used to talk to me sometime in the store, say, you going to college? I said, I don't know. I don't have any money to go there. And he just always engaged me with that. He said, you need to go to college. I told him I graduated top of my class. He said, you need to go to college. One day, he came by in his car to my house. My mom didn't say, well, you getting in the car with that guy? Man, I'm going to take you. You go. Put me in the back. I sat in the back seat. At the time, that's where you sat. I never saw him very much because I only saw the back of his head. And as we rode down to Orangeburg, I had never been west of my hometown. Orangeburg is west of my hometown. I remember doing a painting later on of the peach trees because they pruned them, and I saw the blossoms, and it fascinated me on my way there. He went to Orangeburg, and he went to the big Baptist church on the square in Orangeburg and got the pastor of that church. The two of them sat in the front and took me to Claflin. And, of course, the president was saying, who is this guy here coming with this entourage? And he said he'd give me a scholarship. He didn't give me an academic scholarship. I got a work-study scholarship. Before I went there, though, there was a pastor who was a pastor of a Baptist church, of a Methodist church, who was a Claflin alumna. And they asked him, my mom asked him to write a letter, a recommendation, because Claflin required you to have a recommendation. He said, I don't know what to do. And my mom said, I put a piece on him. And what that meant by that was my mom, if she started arguing, you had to give in. And so he finally wrote the letter, and I went. When I got there, I made all A's my first semester. Second semester, I made all A's. He started bragging about, because ministers did that, I recommended that, I recommended that. He started doing that. And then I graduated top of my class. And my mom couldn't go because the person who supposed to have brought her up there in the truck or whatever didn't make it in time, and so Mom wasn't there for my graduation. That same minister said, your son graduated top of the class and you weren't there. He said, I'm going to put a piece on you. And apparently he did. But that's what happens. When I went to Claflin, the first person I met was a little short guy from Charleston named Arthur Rose. Arthur Rose came back to Claflin. Claflin was the first college or university in South Carolina to have an art department. People don't know that. Before Carolina, before all of them. Because Claflin was founded by people from Boston, and they had art there. And this woman when I say a program, I mean a curriculum that taught criticism, art history, painting and drawing, and the program was there. It went away about 1895 or something about that. And then it wasn't revived again. It's up and down sporadically. And finally, Arthur Rose came and started the program. I was his first student. And we became more than just student teacher. He was like a father figure. Took me to the conventions on the train. I hadn't ridden the train before, and he never let me forget it. You got in big crowds. He said, yeah, I took that boy on his first plane trip. I had to keep him from jumping off the train. But Arthur Rose was a kind of mentor who could get to you, tell you things. He would tell you things that I never knew how important they were then, but I know how important they were now. Like he said, cool your lights and warm your dogs. What does that mean? Then I found out when I started painting what he meant. He was balancing the work. And Arthur Rose kept up with the times, and I think that's why I do that now. He'd say, something tragic would happen. He'd say, I'm going to do me a painting, Jim. And he'd do a painting about it. And he was what I remember as an artist teacher. He taught us to be artists and teachers. And when I designed a program at South Carolina State, I designed a program for artist teachers because so many people teach art, but they don't do art. And if you teach art and you don't do art, you miss the agony and the ecstasy of the experience. And you can't teach about the agony and the ecstasy of the experience unless you've done it. When you paint and you fail, it's agony. When you do it and it works out, it's ecstasy. And you have to know that. And so I did my programs like that. And even the instructors and the administrators at South Carolina said, I don't think they really ever knew that. Because my program was small because we didn't let people come in there shucking and jiving. They had to get to work. I had a printmaker. I hired only professional artists to teach them. People who had a degree in art education but had MFAs. I had an MFA in printmaking, an MFA in sculpture and ceramics. I was in painting. And so I had to paint because if you got you in charge of professional people, the first thing they'll say is, what are you doing? You know? And so we had this strong program. And look, my students did so well. Someone went to doing doctorates. I had 2 students who were in the state art collection. I mean, I graduated from Claflin. Here I am. Winston Wingo is a sculptor. He graduated from Claflin as well. I mean, it had a program that you had to have a strong studio background. And people used to call us and say, you got any teachers there? Who's getting out today? Oh, we want somebody from your program. And eventually, it became one of the top programs. The state students won a lot of awards and things like that. I got the job at South Carolina State because I taught at Lincoln High School in Sumter, and before I went there, my students had won over 35 regional and national awards. One of my students from Spartanburg was the first student in the state to win a National Scholastic Award. Wow. And then I had another student who won an award when I worked at South Carolina State, and they liked it so much that they wanted to use it as an advertisement of the next year's Scholastic Award. It was a print, and they reversed it. They reversed it so that everything that was black in the print turned out white, and they had it, Lincoln High School. It was Felton Laboratory School. And the little girl was so dejected. She came up and said, Dr. Twiggs, you see, they painted but that's not what I did. I said, what they did was they reversed it. You know, Kate did a poster. I have that poster. That poster that she did, and she had Jasper Johns, me, and I cherished that poster because it connected us. You know, it connected us. And I think people know that Jasper Johns did flags, but he did American flags. He did targets too, but he did targets and another kind of thing. But I didn't think about what he was doing. I just concentrated on what I was doing. Yeah. But Kate and I'm still grateful to you for that. And that was in Sumter. You know, I met my wife in Sumter. You know, that's my first job I worked at. She was standing out there looking over here in that backing outfit. I met her there, and yesterday, day before yesterday, 62 years. And as I told the group yesterday, I mean, if I'm standing up here with Luke and Sandy's taking all this stuff about me and I seem to be flying, it's because she is the wind beneath my wings. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming.